they say some things.
Hello. Adventure.
Love.
Connection.
Risk.
Passion.
Evolution.
Play.
Life, the Archetypal Tarot Podcast. Provocative mythology for the 21st century.
Aloha, dear listeners. Julianne here, and this is our first ever triple header, super extra long podcast, and it's all about the High Priestess. What in the world does this mysterious figure have to do with the crazy times we're living in? And how do we hold things as sacred in daily life? Well, we asked two very wise women their take on this and more. Part 1 is Cyndera and I starting things off. Part 2 is a conversation with Rash of Stay Woke Tarot. And Part 3 is a spicy dialogue with Melissa of Little Fox Tarot. So much wisdom and fun, so put those earbuds on and enjoy. Hey, Cyndera, aloha.
Aloha, Julianne.
Oh, wow, we're both sounding kind of like sexy, scratchy voice today, aren't we?
We're smoky, pale high priestesses today.
I know. Well, mine's due to allergies and volcanic fog.
Mine's due to singing ukulele around the fire and feeling the springtime over here in San Francisco.
Oh, I like that. So I think we're just about right tonally to talk about the High Priestess and the Priestess archetype. So I'm sure you remember, like last year at some point, I was like, why is this archetype sort of popping up? Mm-hmm. And it's funny because it was super strong late last year, sort of late summer, fall, but like I just kept thinking about the High Priestess. What's up with the High Priestess? Like, why now in our time and in our world is this archetype showing up? Because it's so, it is a very feminine archetype. It is somewhat mysterious. And I was like, yeah, we need to do a show on it. And I talked to Melissa and I talked to these other people and they're like, yeah, I'm in. I want to do this show. So we're finally doing it now in, April and May of 2018. So that was what I wanted to ask you, Cyndera, is what are you sensing now with this High Priestess in our times right now? It's such a mysterious archetype.
Yeah, it absolutely is. And so the High Priestess, we've discussed her imagery in our past podcast, and she's often seen with this veil, and she's connected to Isis, the goddess, of course, from Egyptian times. And there's this cloaked, veiled quality to the High Priestess, that she has this hidden wisdom. And I think this is an interesting archetype for our time, because I think the voice of women and the voice of many powerful women and the voice of many women who have been disempowered, these are voices that are beginning to come out from behind the veil at this time. So as we hear these voices and they cover the news media and we hear them on the radio and it's this growing phenomenon in the marches and so forth, we're hearing this hidden voice of the High Priestess, and it's remarkable.
So yeah, that I think that hits a really big point of just the feminine voice. The Me Too movement, all of these things are kind of happening, and I was sitting back and trying to think of what is the modus operandi of this High Priestess character, and kind of what I got to, in my own thinking was, for me, there's a certain point where I look at the High Priestess, the HP, as a tarot card story, right? So it's its own mythology. It's part of this journey. And, it's, I think, the third one on a journey. And you've just kind of come from the magician and you get to the priestess. So there's a mythological story. There's a purpose to it as a stage. There is the archetype of the sort of the human representation of the goddess, what's happening behind the veil. But then from my point of view as an archetypal consultant, I have to go with, okay, who is the priestess in our lives? Who are the people who have that priestess archetype? And it doesn't have to be a woman, but I think it's just easier to think about the priestess as being embodied by the feminine in somebody. I guess that's a better way to put it. And what does it look like in the real world? And I think once you jump off of the card and put it into the embodied world, there is a teacher aspect to it. There is a counselor. There is archetypes that we live day to day and that kind of we get embodied. The way I think about it is really, how are we in relationship to the goddess, the god, the goodness in things and other people, and how do we hold things as sacred? So that to me is the role of a priestess, is to remind people that everything is sacred, that every moment is sacred. So there's a meditative aspect to it. And from my personal experience as actually a priestess, in a way, because I officiate weddings and I've been doing that since I was, in my early 20s, of holding that sacred space and doing that for people when they're getting married or they're renewing their vows. And I mentioned it in the conversation with Rash, that for myself, if I don't take that seriously, if I don't do all of those things, like, things don't go well, and that it's really, really an important thing to remember. So in my thinking, it was like, how do we hold things sacred in our day-to-day lives? Do we have practices that bring us back to remembering the sacred? And it really isn't like, it's all about remembering. You have to remember that everything is sacred. It's not like you put your attention on it and all of a sudden it is sacred. No, it always was. But how do we, in our human way, our flawed, beautiful, amazing, crazy way, how do we hold that space for ourselves? How do we do that for others? And with so much strife in the world, that we, the priestesses of the world, can kind of help usher it along, kind of bring that out. And that's really, really important. But you know what? It's not really visible. It's a feminine archetype. So it's about process and community versus just simple agency and doing things. So as hippie and woo-woo as that sound, I just think it's really, really important to have practices, hold yourself in a way that helps enable other people coming to sacred reality, that, everything is sacred. Does that sound too crazy to you?
No, absolutely not. In fact, I'm getting some great imagery in my mind as you're talking about that, of just the playful practices that we can find that bring the priestess into people's lives. And the way that that's touched me recently is, I saw I think it's from the early 90s, the Wong Foo movie.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I realized that if I was a movie, I think I would be Wong Foo. And and it's just about, I feel like it has this incredible priestess energy in it, because these drag queens that are, going into a part of the United States that has never encountered that phenomenon directly, and they bring incredible insights and magic and self-reflection into these people's lives. And it inspired me so much that I did a school fundraiser recently. I was a greeter, and that was the archetype I wanted to channel. Was, I want to go total drag queen priestess. Like, that is the thing that I need to do.
We posted it on Instagram too. You looked amazing.
Thank you so much. And it was really funny, because not everyone knew that was my intention. And one of my colleagues said, well, I mean this very respectfully, but I was kind of getting this drag queen kind of feel. I was like, that is exactly what I was going for.
Oh my gosh.
It just helped welcome people and invite people into a space that was sacred and celebratory. And, by putting on the veils, or by playing in these archetypes, I think it awakens some wonderful things for people. And it was lots of fun.
I wish I was there. And anybody listening, go to our Facebook, our Instagram. You will see some photos of Cyndera in her alien high priestess costume. And Cyndera, I have to ask you, so amazing outfit. Your skirt actually had lights in it, which I thought was amazing. And it looks like you have kind of a scepter or a wand in one hand. And the other hand, almost inexplicably, it looks like a black lobster claw. Is that what you had on your hand?
Absolutely, yes. Well, I needed to be really alien, so that was, I was I needed something for the other hand, and this was quite synchronistic. But I was like, where am I going to buy just one glove for my other hand? Went to the costume store, and thanks to Michael Jackson, I was able to acquire one sparkly sequined glove for the other hand.
Oh, perfect.
Total synchronicity. It was
I
amazing.
think, well, too, I immediately, when I saw the lobster claw, it's this black, looks like furry kind of a lobster claw on one hand. I thought of the moon card with the lobsters at the moon and, my kind of imagery around that. So it's just a little bit crazy. It's a little bit like, what's going on here? But that was beautiful. God, hang on to that costume. I want to borrow it from you.
You totally can.
Oh, and I love the point you brought about Wong Foo and the most recent podcast ahead of this one. There was Sean Nygaard and I were actually talking about Priscilla, Queen of the Desert, and those movies kind of I think Wong Foo came out after that, but there is that sort of discovery of the feminine, holding sacred space. There's a lot kind of in them if you watch these movies with an archetypal eye. So I kind of like that. It's welcoming, and in all of them they are men taking on the feminine, and not all of them I think succeed in actually like truly embodying that sort of process community part, or not consistently, with the exception of Terrence Stamp character. I think she definitely is. Bernice is the feminine throughout. So I love it. I love bringing kind of these ideas like the High Priestess to our lives, to really look at, how they're showing up, who they are, how can we as people who I'm assuming want to have good things in the world, want to be part of it, to kind of take a look at what are the qualities that we have in ourselves already, and what are the qualities that are wanting to come forward, and that we can help those qualities come out by, I think sacred practices are important. People who meditate, people who have mindfulness, and I think there's a good deal to do with nature, to remember that, we are connected to the flora and the fauna of the world. I think the witch archetype too is obviously related. It's something that I think in modern times, unless you are Wicca or you are pagan or have some of those practices, it's a reviled archetype. But I really do see it as being a part of the Venn diagram of what the priestess is in the world, and specifically related to nature. How do we hold that sacred presence in the world and use our powers for good? And so it's going to be interesting. I think the next conversation that we have in this podcast episode, it's a triple header, quadruple header, because you and I count as two. But when I talk to Melissa, it'll be interesting to see what she has to say. So
yeah, I'm very excited about your interviews and what you're bringing and pulling together in this High Priestess dialogue, and very excited to see what comes from it.
Yeah, and the more characters, because it's just kind of a fun one in the way that, like, I think the High Priestess, she's not a glammy. She's not as interesting, I think, on the surface. But I think that's the entire point of the High Priestess stage is it is a process. It's not glammy. There's way more to it that I think in a way you don't even talk about, because it's experiential. It's that intuitive side of things. It's that territory that is difficult for most of us to traverse or to enter into, because it's the not obvious. It is subtle. It's water. It's things as they ripple. It's related to the moon card, because it's not an analog, straightforward, this is how things are. It's kind of like an entire realm that we have to almost quiet the rational mind, quiet the mind that has to name everything and be sure of everything. It is like this beautiful sense of potentiality and incompleteness. I think as humans, we want to complete everything. We want everything to have parts that we can name, and a chronology and all of these organizational structures, whereas the epitome of the feminine is wholeness, is organicness, but it's an ever-changing, moving thing that defies that kind of, I would call it a kind of a masculine approach to organize things. So that disorganization and just beingness of it is difficult for many of us. I know it is for me. And I don't know, I'm guessing that my intuitive hunch over the last 6 months over why this archetype keeps coming up is asking us to explore it for ourselves and to be present with it. I think even explore kind of means you have to go and come up with something and create a path and a plan. It's sort of like, no, I think it's messy. I think it's watery energy. It's emotional, but like to really like make space for that and to realize it's important.
Yeah, I would love to hear in response to some of these recordings that you do, if our listeners want to reach out, in which ways the High Priestess shows up for them and in what forms. It'd be very interesting in this period of time to see what that is.
Yeah, I am hoping we get tons of conversation when I post this podcast. Everybody can just show up on Instagram, on Twitter, on Facebook if they want to email us. I'm really interested in that too, because I do believe that we are part of a collective evolution and that, we are connected in ways that we can't even fathom.
Yeah, and the High Priestess is this number 2 card, which really introduces the idea of relationship, of communication, both within ourselves and with others. And I have been, studying the tarot as the tool, I think, of the priestess, particularly in our work. And it's interesting to look at things in the numbers sense and to see those number 2 cards that show up in the larger tarot as sort of tools, and to see how those might be showing up in some of your practices that you're doing as a priestess. So when you're looking at the 2 of the swords, the 2 of cups, the 2 of wands, the 2 of pentacles, and I'm really enjoying going to this deeper layer of the tarot, and also, if you add the numbers together in some of the larger cards, as the Judgment card is card number 20, so 2 plus 0, you can look at how the Judgment card is connected to the High Priestess, and also the card number 11, the Strength card, relates to the High Priestess, and this is, of course, a book that goes deeply into those sorts of connections is the Tarot Handbook by Angeles Arian. So I'm sure many of our listeners are familiar with her amazing work, but that's a way to really sink your teeth into these deeper connections inside of the tarot world, which is super cool.
Yeah, and speaking of embodied priestess, Angeles Arian is definitely one of those people. And I mentioned Jean Houston, who I studied with. A lot of, I think, our specifically feminine spiritual teachers do embody the priestess archetype, bringing the sacred and but there's a leadership part of it too, but it's not a leadership in I'm going to show up and you follow me. It's more of like a really, really embodied sense that and I kind of feel it in myself. It's no accident that I'm marrying people and being a wedding officiant, like, duh, priestess. But I really do believe that if I wasn't able to embody that archetype, people would not be coming to me to perform their weddings. Do you know what I mean? Like it is something that is embodied. And I was like 22 when a friend asked me to help officiate their wedding. And I'd never done that before. It never even really occurred to me. And, they came to me going, oh, no, you'd be great at this. And I'm like, wait, what? Me? I'm a photographer. I just graduated from art school. So, people know more about us, I think, sometimes than we do. I think with an archetype, frequently you can try to downplay it, but it's always there. It's always needed for something. And I'm definitely feeling much energy and blessing and honor from doing that, performing weddings for people, officiating for people, showing up for them in that way. It is such an honor. And I am realizing it's part of my, soul path or part of what I'm here to do. And, I enjoy it. So this is our official introduction to this quadruple header podcast, first time ever, experiment with several voices all about the High Priestess. So hopefully this works out and we'll do more.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for launching this, Julianne, this conversation, and can't wait to hear the interviews to follow.
Yeah, I know, me too. And we have showing up, this is a recording that will be Hawaii, San Francisco, California. We're going to have Missouri, and then we have Zurich, Switzerland. So, we are bringing together thousands of miles and some really bright, brilliant minds who I love. So I'm excited for it too. Thanks, Cyndera. I'm so glad we could do this.
Oh, thanks, Julianne.
Part 2 of the Lowdown on the High Priestess is a conversation with Rashunda Tramble of Stay Woke Tarot. Now, Rash is an African-American immigrant living in Switzerland, and she has this amazing blog and website, which if you haven't checked out already, you must do. It's staywoketarot.com. You can also book a reading with her on her website, and for sure, make sure you're following her on Instagram at Stay Woke Tarot. And here's my conversation with Rash.
Rash, hi, nice to meet you.
Hi. Well, nice to finally meet you also, Julianne. Thank you very much for the invitation.
Absolutely. I'm excited to have you on the show. Not only are you an amazing human being, you have a really fantastic blog, and I love following your Instagram feed, and we've been enjoying what you've got to offer us. And a while back, you came on as a patron, which thank you so much for that. Seriously, it's amazing. And so I'm excited that you could be on a show talking about the High Priestess.
Wow. Well, thank you. And geez, thanks for all of what you've said. It's interesting because I didn't put the blog up or do the Instagram to get any type of, I don't know, any type of attraction or whatever. It was just I wanted to get my feelings out there. I have started doing readings somewhat, but that wasn't the focus of it. I just, I had something to say and I said, hey, let me just put it out there and then that's it. So yeah, so thank you very much.
You are welcome. And yes, the universe responds in kind. And people show up and they're like, your unique voice is important. And I think that's kind of how these things end up happening almost organically. And it's almost better that way, I think, than when people front load everything with, I'm going to do this. They have that kind of masculine idea of goal. Here's what I do to reach it. And that's fine. That's one model. But I think, especially what we're talking about today is a more feminine principled archetype, and that's the priestess, which what is it, that it's the third card in the deck, or fourth, depending on how people look at it,
how you count it.
But to me it's always like, I don't know, it gets skipped over a lot. I don't know that the High Priestess gets a ton of attention,
not as much as the Empress.
In terms
not
of
as
feminine.
much as the Empress. In terms of the feminine, people have a tendency, at least in my opinion, have a tendency to focus on the Empress. But the High Priestess deserves credit too.
Yeah, in terms of, so my thought on the High Priestess and that kind of getting ignored, it's in a way it makes sense because it's a feminine character, and it's pretty mysterious, right? The images that are held, there's like, what is she doing? Like she's not a very open. Generally openly drawn, because it's an internal space. That's kind of what she's about.
She operates sort of under the surface of the lake, you could say. She's not exactly this. She's not in the fast speeding boat saying, "Hey, look at me" or whatever. She's just sort of going along, doing her business, and you don't see what she's doing. You feel it like a ripple, but you don't see it.
Exactly. And I think it was months and months ago, actually, that I was talking with another guest that'll be on this show is Melissa from Little Fox Tarot. She and I had a long, curse-ridden conversation, which was fun. But at the end of that, in our own personal chit-chat, I was like, I'm feeling the High Priestess lately. Let's talk about that later. So just now it's coming to fruition. So I just wondered, what are your thoughts on this powerful in a very feminine way,
Yeah,
card and story?
I this is something, I mean, we mentioned a little bit earlier that I'm sort of trying to wrap my head around myself, this concept of the high priestess, and thinking about exactly what is a priestess. And I do know that in tarot, there is a very worthy movement about having different representations of what the high priestess is or what a high priestess looks like or whatever. But even still, we all have this archetype or a part of this high priestess in ourselves. But if you don't see that externally, you don't know how to recognize it in yourself. So that's sort of what I'm going through right now. I mean, it's very easy to say I'm a high priestess if you're all dressed up and you have the long flowing hair and this and that or whatever. But for me, it's like, do I have the ability to see the high priestess in myself when I'm bloated? When your face is all broken out and you're sitting there with a can of Pringles and like some chocolate on the side. I mean, that's does it always have to be this? Does a high priestess always have to be this regal,
Put together?
Put together? Apparently the high priestess card is descended from the popist card. Mm-hmm. Does the priestess always have to be that regal and so, put together? And that's my personal thing that I'm going through with it right now. I think, a while ago when, I think I posted something saying, I can't remember if I said it was the priestess or the oracle or something, or the priestess or the empress, but I posted the oracle from Matrix. Boom. On my Instagram. Boom. Yeah, saying, this is what I think of, or this is what comes to my mind when I think of, a magical woman. Mm-hmm. Not someone, I mean, of course, nothing against wands, athames, anything like that, mm-hmm. Nothing against it, but just someone in their kitchen sitting there making magic. It could be your grandmother, it could be your mom, just someone just normal. Yeah. So it's my long-winded explanation of where I am right now in this.
Well, that's perfect, actually. And I think that's something that Cyndera and I at some point realized what we were doing with this podcast is just like, we need to make this stuff real to people, to kind of bring it down off the page, off the card, off the movie screen, mm-hmm. so we can see how they're operating in and of ourselves. So if we agree that these are universal stories, universal archetypes, and I think a lot of tarot decks that have come out in the last, 15 years are doing a very good job of going, this is what it really looks like to us. Mm-hmm. It's nice to have mm-hmm. these ancient icons to look at, which, I think the Rider-Waite is ancient enough that it is in that status along with the Marseille and the others. But you're exactly right. Who is this priestess now? Mm-hmm. Who is she now? And the oracle in the Matrix is spot on. And no, she's not dressed in these robes, but as everyone knows, if you've seen that movie, she is very much treated as, and she acts as the high priestess, and she's mysterious, but she's warm. Mm-hmm. She's warm and she's loving. And to me, the reason I just immediately madly and fell in love with that character was she owned that space when Neo comes in, and he's looking for, mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I need to know, and this for him is life and death. And she's just like, she's got this knowingness about her that's just like, it's all going to work out. And you sweet little fool come in here,
Exactly.
And,
that's,
exactly.
Let me give you a hug. Let me,
here's a cookie.
Here's a cookie.
Here's a cookie.
Yeah, or candy. It was a candy. Would you like a candy or something like that? But so that's sort of what I'm processing right now. Mm-hmm. I think also, especially in terms of being aware of being, I like to say staying woke or being woke. What's going on in society that is making me question my high priestessness? Being aware of that, being aware of what's making me go, well, wait, why don't I feel this way or whatever? And I think that's very important too.
That's incredibly important.
You have to You have to learn that. Especially in my case, I'm an African American woman living in Switzerland, and I step out on the street, like I go to the train station, and you see lots of beautiful women who they're tall, they don't have hips, they that nature, and even the advertising here, it's directed towards a particular type of woman, at least advertising for women.
Right.
Plastic surgery is big here.
Really?
Really? Yeah. Plastics, things of that nature. Ads for liposuction. So it's two things. It's learning how to recognize, or I need to learn how to recognize a priestess in myself, but also question, okay, why don't I? Am I up against? So yeah, that's another thing too.
The high priestess, because the nature, so much of it is internal. It is, and like you mentioned earlier, you feel the ripple in the water, but you're not, so it's not about so much that is external. And when a society is being fed all of this external stuff, the posters, how things are advertised to, I will bet you, no matter who it is on the street, even if they look just like what they're being told they need to look like, inside of them is still that feminine force that I think will rebel against all of those external things. Something about the priestess brings you internal and reminds you that that's important as well. And in fact, more important, because isn't it, if you're coming from the deep well of authenticity within you and you're bringing it externally, all of that advertising and stuff doesn't matter. It shouldn't matter.
Exactly. And it will, I think, honestly, for me, I think it's gotten to that point where I do ignore it. But that's the thing. You have it in yourself to say, okay, that's nice, or yeah, that, this is nice, that's nice, but I'm okay with who I am, and I can make my own magic inside of myself. Yeah, I think it's really important, especially with the high priestess, to realize that you have the high priestess is sort of, I think I read this somewhere, it's sort of you've got the magician in a magician card that's like, hey, look at me, look at all my tools, look at all the stuff I can do with all my accoutrements, whatever that is. But with the high priestess, she's just sort of sitting there and saying, I don't need all that. It's nice, you've got nice shiny stuff, but I think I'm okay with what I have. And I think that's really important with the high priestess too, especially when you pull that card in a spread or as part of a reading. You've got the magician saying, yes, I can do it all and I have all the tools, but there's sort of the person may not be sure of themselves and they need to be told, you have all the tools that you need to get this done. Whereas with the high priestess, it's more of, if it comes up in a spread, I'll say, you know that you know that you know.
Yeah.
So that's sort of how I see the high priestess. It's like you that it's there. You just need to just go ahead and address it and embrace it.
Yeah.
And go. Yeah.
And no one can do it for you. And I think that's the point of, in the oracle in the Matrix, he's there to be like, dispense your answer, lady. And she's just basically like, boop, you have to do it on the inside. You have to do that recognition. No one else can do it for you, no matter how much they want to. You have to come to those realizations yourself. And that's difficult. That's difficult.
Didn't that also happen in The Wizard of Oz? Yep. It's the same thing. Dorothy was like, it's got to be the shoes, and it's like, no, it's always been inside of you. It's not the shoes. You're not a basketball player. It's not the wizard. It's you. It's you. You're the one that can do it. So yeah. So that's sort of my relationship with the priestess, I guess. And also when you're going through a time when you're getting older and, the saddlebags are coming or whatever. It's easy to think of yourself as a high priestess when you're young and, oh, yeah, I got it going on. But, like I said in the beginning, it's, when, you start seeing the wrinkles or when you start seeing the, things happening to your body, you're still a priestess.
Yeah. Well, I think of the high priestess also as the sage. And there's the archetypal journey between the maiden, the mother, and the crone, or maiden, mother, sage. And the high priestess is very much a sage. In fact, the word sage and burning of sage is a purification. So to me, and I ain't getting any younger. In fact, we're the same age.
We're the same age.
It's a paradigm shift, right? And there are people that I know who are good 15, 20 years older than me, but when they've talked about when they had that realization that youth and the idea of youth and the tight skin and all of the things that go with that was, important, but the values that they have realized as they got older never belonged in youth. They couldn't have because they needed to happen over time and through experiences, both good and bad. So they realized they could feel their value better as they got older, and that paradigm of youth was something that they realized that younger person is still inside of them, but it's not the most valuable thing. It's still a very externally focused. And I think the high priestess is one of at least several cards, because the hermit tells you to go back in as well, or you're internal. So this feminine representative of, if you're a young person and you get that, it's just frustrating because you need speed and you want stuff to happen. The magician just gave you tools, and now you got to sit here. Now you have to trust this feminine nature. It's the opposite, and I think our culture just doesn't value it all that much. And we're all about agency, but she brings you to process and community. Sort of like those are internal things, but they're really, really nutritious, right? When you're relating with a group of people and you're able to be with them authentically, that is actually way more satisfying than the go get this thing. Because once you have that thing, you got to share it, right? Once you've achieved something and you're in your youth, but if you don't have any friends and you don't have community, it's just, why would you even want to have it anymore? It's again about relationship and moving towards that. So
it's about relationships. It's about your external relationships, but also your internal relationship too, like with yourself, with people who have passed on, with your ideas. It's that too. They're connected. I believe it's all connected.
So I've got to, and I love these shows because we can talk to different types of people. And who are the other people that are representing the high priestess who show up? And we know its nature isn't something that will necessarily be out front and center, just because its very nature it's guarded, it's relaxed, it's not guarded in a masculine way. It's just got such a strong pulse of feminine energy that it radiates that sort of like, the boundary is there. It's a veil, but it's there. So find who, I think in the Star Wars episode, we talked about General or Admiral Holdo, who was Laura Dern's character, purple hair.
Yes.
And how frustrating she was. Because to the audience, and to me too, it was like, come on, lady, just explain. But no, she held it. She's like...
She held it in. She's like, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But I mean, she did, She's a very good example of the high priestess where she was operating under the water, under, just no one could, there were ripples. You could see like, lady, what is going on? But she didn't broadcast. What she was doing or her plan or anything like that.
So there's the idea that the priestess just simply transmits this sort of like water type energy, those ripples. But there's also more of a present speaking, transmitting
energy and wisdom to people. Jean Houston very much was that. She had a priestess sort of set of her body, and she was teaching us archetypes and mythology and processes. She was very, very. The reason I loved going to study with her after Carolyn Mace is because we had these embodied processes that she was teaching us to do that will work our minds and get more things working. You know, your sense of your five senses, getting engaged with problem solving. Sacred dance, all those things that get things embodied. So I think a priestess can be a feminine leader, teaching and getting other people to bring all of the elements of themselves into what they're doing. So it's both process and product. It's agency and community.
This is where I'm going to say something slightly. I agree with what you're saying in terms of the high priestess leading or whatever, but I think the high priestess also needs to learn or also knows when not to lead. He or she also, because I also believe that the qualities of high priestess can be for males or females.
Absolutely.
This person knows, hey, here is someone maybe younger or whatever that needs some energy. They would make a very good leader. They would be someone who could be at the forefront. Let me lend my energy to this person. Now, that young person may not even realize it, but just the high priestess can give them that little push and say, okay, go ahead and get out there. It's your turn. So I sort of see that too as not just sometimes we have this idea of the woman sitting on her throne and everyone is gathered around. But I think the high priestess can also be one of the people gathered around and just sort of sending energy to that person that is on the throne. That's also operating under the water.
Yeah. No, it's true. I think it's one of those. I think what it comes down to is the priestess energy. If it's embodied in the feminine, is a representation of goddessness. So if you are the human version of that, or the oracle, all of those kind of come, the oracle archetype, priestess, high priestess, they're the feminine representation of the goddess. And that's what people frequently say. And I agree, but they can transmit that energy and do it from a very quiet place, but also people can come to that priestess for sacred ceremony. And I know for myself, I made mistakes are often our best teachers and almost always a good teacher. But I didn't prepare the way that I knew I should have for a ceremony. And I have over the years kind of built up what that is. But you're holding an energetic space. You're not just saying words. You're not just saying this and that. Those are all very important. But you are literally holding a space for people to commit, in this case, commit to a marriage inside of that circle. So the energetic element, and for me, I didn't, get all of the prep that I needed to done from the very physical things, but really the emotional, spiritual stuff. So I realized after that service, it was fine. The couple was fine, but I knew I wasn't holding that space, and I let other people's kind of energy break it. I do Hawaiian chants. So there's a Hawaiian chant that's part of one of my ceremonies. And I let myself get rattled. So that chant was not performed perfectly. Not that they would even know necessarily. These people weren't from here. But the point is, for the learning point of the priestess, after that, I couldn't sleep for days because I didn't do it.
Okay.
And certain mistakes to other people are like, yeah, whatever. But like, that was a priestess lesson for me. So the requirement for a priestess, not just the knowledge, not just holding that feminine, but all of the things around the preparation for being able to hold that energy, to hold that space, to be really, really holding that feminine space, everything that needs to be done. So if we look at the magician, the things you learn, the practices, the meditations, the chants that I do for myself, the sage ceremony. So after, it was like 3 days and 3 nights of me just really beating myself up over it. But I didn't want to throw that whole experience out. I was like, okay, every night when I woke up thinking about how horrible I felt that I didn't do what I was supposed to
Oy.
do. Oh,
Yeah.
exactly. And it was so strong in me, but I realized, what would the priestess do? It's like, you learn, you hold that was difficult, and I will know better from now on. I will, the sacredness of the preparation that I do has to be done, and it is sacred. And what had happened with that ceremony is I was running late. I only did half the mantra in the car on the way there. So I did not
as you were
honor.
driving, yeah.
Yes, I didn't
Yes.
honor the goddess. I didn't honor the goddess within me. I didn't do the things that I knew that needed to be done. I cut corners. And it really would have been better for me to have been a little bit late then and to do what I needed to do. So it brought me back into the feminine, the internal. There are things that I need to do, but those processes, the things I need to do, bring me back to that goddess center, goddess center. So I can do what I am there to do, whether the people who hired me to do it or not. It didn't matter about them. It's like what I offer to them, I bring no matter what. And they can receive that. And I could kind of tell, like, throughout the ceremony that, like, part of what I was supposed to be transmitting wasn't being received. And that is a very priestess sort of like experience to have, but difficult lesson to this day. I can like go, oh.
Yeah, but then when you get it right, you really get it right and you can feel it.
Yes.
That's the thing. But one thing I thought about, especially, you're in a spiritual business in terms of being a reverend, and you've married the priestess with what you do in your life. But like for someone who, I've had corporate jobs, that sort of, you have to find different ways of bringing that priestess element into the office. I can think of a situation where I was in this is years ago, I was in a very, very tough conference call. And for me to still remember this thing even years ago, it made an impact. A really tough conference call, and one of the gentlemen that was on the call with me, he basically, it was some ideas, people were trying to pitch, and he basically was very aggressive and said, you all are going to let me get my point across no matter what, or I'm going to, he said something like, ram the presentation down our throats. So I can't remember what it was, but and but everyone was pretty shocked. And then I just I closed my eyes and I just said, I've got to change the energy in this room. I've got to change the energy in this room. I've got to, okay, let me try that. And then still during the conference call, I said his name and then I said, breathe. And everyone just sort of stopped. And I said, take a breath in, take a breath out. And everyone just said, oh my gosh, what is she doing? And I was like, this is just, we got to take it down a couple of notches.
Yeah.
And I think that's also where you can bring your priestess energy into the workplace, into particular situations where you need some, I hate saying wisdom because that's a slightly arrogant thing, but just you need someone who can just create this spiritual space where there isn't any at that moment. And you can kind of create that magic to do that, to create that bubble. Of course, I didn't make my little cosmic bubble around it, but I just closed my eyes and I said, okay, we got to change this.
Yeah.
This is not going anyway. Yeah. So I think that's another way. Yeah.
That's a perfect example of how it can be in our everyday lives. And I guess what I'm getting from this conversation is, and that it's a term that almost gets overused, but that holding space, the elemental, your own energy, your relationship with the people around you, people will get sort of the high energy, angry kind of stuff that's happening, but most people wouldn't do anything about it other than protect themselves, right? People go back into their own corners.
Yes.
And, you let the bully win, basically.
Mm-hmm.
But the handling of yourself, the knowingness, the inner knowingness, and you just followed your instincts. You're just like, this is
Yeah.
going to happen. And I'm sure
And in that conference room, I'll never forget, I saw people shrinking back like, oh my God, this guy is really about to pop. And people were like, where's the door? And I just said, okay, something's got to happen here. We can't, we cannot let the screaming and hollering continue. And so that's why I did what I did. But I think all of us have the power to do that.
Mm-hmm.
Just need to learn how to get in touch with it. Yeah, I think that's the most important thing. We all have the capacity to be high priestesses.
And it's, I think this is a good way to wrap it up. I used to call it presence of mind years and years ago, but it really is just, it's not even mindfulness, because mindfulness is just about the mind. I think with the feminine, it's heartedness. It's hearted and minded. You know what I mean? There is the you're able to stay present, to understand what's happening, but you're centered also in your heart, and you're centered in something that's much more rooted in the earth. The priestess isn't flying. She's not a spirit flying off and showing you the air. She's about the water and the earth. So that ability to have a practice, to practice mindfulness that then leads you to heartedness, to the authenticity, to the realizing that you're so centered in that just your presence brings people kind of a little bit closer to that in themselves. And then you can do external things as well, like speaking up and saying something and going, breath, take a breath. That is, I think, a big part of it. You think? It seems to me like that's what you did.
Yeah. I think just to connect. It's connecting the heart and the mind, and that's magic in itself. That's what we're talking about in terms of the internal, working that magic internally, using that high priestess power to make that happen.
So, Rash, wow, I've seriously loved this conversation, and I've gotten a lot out of it for me to think about for myself. Are we going to
Same here, Jillian?
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, I'm on this path of accepting this inner high priestess and what to do with that. And this talk has been great in terms of helping me along that path. So thank you very much for that.
And me too, I think. But there is something about right now in 2018 that, I don't know, I'm personally drawn to kind of like talk about it, because I don't know, there's so much strife in the world. There's so much of that mind, war, that like maybe it's difficult to try to bring that priestess in, but maybe that's what we're being asked to do.
Mm-hmm. Bring in some more of that energy, to balance it out.
To recognize that it's there, and potentially, I don't know, I'm guessing potentially way more powerful than we even give it credit for.
Because she operates under the surface.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Part 3 of the Lowdown on the High Priestess is a dialogue with author and card slinger Melissa of Little Fox Tarot. She's been slinging tarot cards and teaching classes since 1989. She can be found in the St. Louis area and online for personal readings, parties, and beginner to advanced tarot classes. Her first book, Kitchen Table Tarot, was released in 2017, and her new book, Tarot Elements, 5 Readings to Reset Your Life, will be out in February of 2019. You can find her at littlefoxtarot.com, on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And go ahead and schedule a reading with her, because she already knows you want one. And here is our funny and explicit conversation with Melissa of Little Fox Tarot.
Hi, Melissa.
Hi, how are you?
We're pretending that we just got on the phone with each other. Isn't that clever?
Did I not tell you Sagittarius cannot lie? I'm not good at this. Hi, Sugar.
Hi. It's good to connect with you again. And I remember at the end of the podcast that we did together last year, we talked a little bit about the HP, the High Priestess.
Yes.
This is like 8 months ago. because I personally was kind of feeling that archetype come up, and I'm like, what? Wait, why? Is this helpful? She's not helpful. She's just sitting there, like she's holding on to shit. We don't know, so like, but it's been really, really strong with me. And so I decided, you know what? I'm going to ask amazing people about this tarot card, about the archetypes. And, if you can answer the question, why the bloody hell is this coming up now with all this crazy shit happening in our world? Maybe we'll start with, when you see the High Priestess show up in a reading, what are your thoughts? What's your kind of go-to for situation with the HP?
Obviously with tarot, it depends on the reading and the person and the placement and the blah and the blah. What generally I see, though, and it's taken me a really hard time to put myself in this place, is that that's them coming to me for answers that they're seeking. And maybe it's not me, maybe it's a teacher, or maybe it's someone that's already in their life, or whatever. But what it tells me is that they're looking for answers. And if I see it in a specific placement, maybe that they already have the answers and they really don't need to be asking the question. They just need to look and figure out what it is. So it's really dependent upon the reading and the person, but it's that, I don't know, where can I look for answers, or can you help me? Like it's always a request. And I found that I can tell if it's me, right? That it's the tarot reader showing up. If it's the first card I throw down, I'm like, well, you called me. Good job. Here we go. This is the first step on the path to figuring out what's going on. And then I try to figure out from them, what is the specific question they're asking? And I'm actually kind of writing a book about this right now. But like, I have a lot of people call me and they'll say, am I going to die alone, and a cat's going to eat my eyeballs? I'm never going to find.
Everybody worries about that.
Right. That's not what they're asking. What they're asking is, why am I alone? And what that actually means is, what is it about me that I need to shift so I stop bringing assholes into my life willingly, or that I stop isolating myself, or whatever. So to me, the High Priestess is kind of looking through the question to what it actually is, if that makes sense. It's kind of that drilling down. It's like getting below the surface of, no, you're not going to die alone and your cats aren't going to eat your face. However, what is it about you that makes you think that having a person will make you happy? Why do you think that this is the only thing that you can do to have happiness in your life? Is that you have to find a person, you have to check that box, and then everything's going to be okay. Let's look at why you're not okay first, Yeah.
Yeah. Finding a good question, and that's most of the journey, I think, in a lot of cases. Cyndera and I, one of the patron level awards is, and Cyndera and I don't really actively do readings, although that could be changing soon. Long story short, both of us will, for people who sign up at a certain level, what we realized pretty quickly in doing that, which is just a few readings, a year, is really, really looking at what the question is, rather than asking them to write a paragraph about what they're curious about. I mean, that's helpful too. It's helpful to just, get that out of your head into some sort of written form, but to really, and so what I ended up coming up with were example questions that they could kind of meditate on and look at to go, oh, is that the deeper level of what you're really doing?
Right. Yeah.
Archetypal questions. So it's that even before the reading has begun, there's work that needs to be done, and that kind of gets you halfway. And it's been fascinating because Cyndera and I will kind of give our answers separately. She'll be pulling a card and writing something up where she is, and I'm doing the same. And I combine them into one email and send them. And
cool.
It's really, really interesting. But I think it gets to the point of the High Priestess. She sits on her throne. The imagery is it's very archetypal in that most cards have that representation of the feminine figure, the columns behind her, but it's that sitting in place for a while, being with whatever it is, and then being invited to look through the veil, or what is behind it, and that
what's behind the curtain.
And I almost envision it as like you can't really approach the High Priestess archetypally till you've actually, it's like she's not going to say a damn word until you have the right
No.
question.
And you better use your manners too.
Yes.
Like there's an element of a demand of respect with that card. And I always think about, the old oracles and the Sphinx and and the Never Ending Story, which is one of my favorite books and movies, where if you doubt yourself, or if you step off of the path or start wondering why you're doing this, they're going to zap you with their eye lasers and you're going to be fucking toast, right? And I feel like that kind of confidence is required when you ask the deeper questions and stand in front of her and make your request, is that you have to know for certain what you want and who you are, so that you can get the answer that will serve you. Because if you're calling me to say, the cat's going to eat my face, that's not the answer to that. Yes or no is not going to help you at all in your life. Nothing, that won't help you at all. But if I tell you you have some trauma in your past that you need to deal with so that you can have a comfortable relationship with yourself, so that you can then bring people towards you who are also whole or getting there or working on it or whatever, that will get you somewhere. Knowing that you're not going to be alone when you die, who the fuck cares? It doesn't fucking matter. Nobody cares. And it's not important. Knowing that you're a whole integrated person who then deserves love, who then can see that they deserve love, that's important. It's a lot of pressure to stand in front of that chick.
I think it requires dropping a lot of ego. I always think of the High Priestess, even though it's feminine, it's air, it's water, the symbol of the moon, and to me, there's a big relationship between the moon and the High Priestess. And the moon is frequently kind of, it's craziness. Like there could be craziness, so don't come with that. You've got to be like both feet on the ground, kind of drop the artifice of whatever your sort of like your initial concern is, and come with that. And in that case, you'll be able to see what happens next. But if you come with all the craziness and the bouncing around crazy monkey mind, you're not going to be able to see anything. You will just see what you're afraid of. So,
and it's kind of, and to go back to the Never Ending Story, which is clearly the font of my knowledge, when he gets to the end, like he makes it through the Sphinxes and he stands in front of a mirror and it shows you who you really are, right? So I don't know if I talked about this last time. I gave a reading one time. I had reflective sunglasses on because I was sitting outside and I had my aviators on. And the person said, "You're freaking me out because all I can see is me when I talk to you." And I'm like, that's kind of the point, sis. The point is that you come to me so you can see yourself more clearly. And I think that that's the role of the High Priestess, is that people hit the High Priestess when they need to see themselves more clearly. And it's really fucking scary to see yourself clearly, because you have to clear away all of the things that you show other people and all of the artifice and all of the I'm fine and Facebook posts that show that your life is perfect, and all of that shit falls away and you're naked saying, how can I be authentic? How can I get to the best me? How do I do this? Please tell me, because what I'm doing now isn't working, or I wouldn't be standing here, right?
Yeah, I'm thinking of the archetypal characters in film and television. I mean, you can look at the fairy godmothers. They're all, it's like I always think of things as a Venn diagram. You have the solid sort of archetype in the middle, but then I'm thinking the blue fairy in Pinocchio, and you want to be real. That wish to be a real boy, and the blue fairy granting that, and it's symbolic. The meta story is quite possibly the answer is, you are more amazing than you can ever imagine, but you need to start imagining it. And by doing that, you need to drop a bunch of crap and let all of that go to see.
Cut those strings, baby.
Yes.
Or even Agra, like from the Dark Crystal. It smells like Gelfling, sounds like Gelfling, must be Gelfling. This is who you are. True. This is true, a true thing, and I love Agra, by the way. She's my favorite. But it's her entire job is to say, this is who you are. This is the path that you're on. This is how the story needs to end. Here's the tool you need to do this, to end the story, this, fool's journey that you're on. But the answer, he didn't want the answers. he wanted someone to tell him everything was going to be okay, and that is not her job. If you want comfort, you need to go to the Empress. You don't need to go to the High Priestess, because she doesn't give a shit about comforting you. That's not her job. And to some degree, I actually just blogged about this, that if as a High Priestess, if you and I as tarot readers are High Priestesses, and we offer, instead of advice and counsel, we offer comfort, we're not doing our job. And we can offer advice in a compassionate way, in an empathetic way. But once we start offering that advice sympathetically, we slide into the Empress, and we start making them feel better, rather than giving them the tools that they can use to make their lives better. So yeah, it's an interesting it's a short trip to go from those two women,
Yeah, and I think, well, it just depends on where you're archetypally seated yourself. The sort of a real life manifestation of a priestess. It's like the High Priestess is one thing, the Empress is another. I can certainly see a place in regular life for particularly a woman, but a feminine character, a person who is tasked with holding sacred space, of actually being either with a church or outside of a church, being the purveyor, holding sacred space. And you can be both the Empress mother character as well as the priestess. It's that it's what is coming from within you. Like for myself, I feel way more like an Empress most of the time than I would, the High Priestess. It sort of pops in and out. But being an officiant for weddings and ceremonies, I talked with Rash about this. That is something that's always been with me. I started doing weddings in my 20s, which was, frankly, a little weird in the early 90s. It wasn't done. We're in a different time now. But that responsibility to hold that space, to kind of have that like warm, embracing part, but also to give things the honor that they deserve in terms of what a ceremony is, and to be the person it can be like, we're here now, we're doing this thing,
And she used to be called the Popess. I mean, that's not nothing. I think that I'm different from you in that I think that I used to live in the Empress every time I gave a reading. And I've been doing this for 30 years, so this is like 15 years ago. And I remember driving away from a reading, and I was just soggy with the other person's emotions, and I was sobbing on the side of the highway, trying to call my Reiki buddy to get it off of me. And I was like, I can't do this anymore, because I was ex-social worker, hello. I'm like a bleeding heart, literally walking around on 2 feet. I can't function as a good I can't function as a good reader if I am in the Empress. I can only do it if I am in the High Priestess, because I'm kind of like a Vulcan in that I have so many emotions that if I bring them all to the table in a reading, I'll drown. And if I grab the other person's emotions in a reading, I'll drown with them. And my job is to throw them a lifeline and not to drown with them. So it helped me clarify my role, finally accepting the High Priestess as kind of my, like, a couple of years ago, somebody was like, what's your favorite card? I'm like, I don't have one. And my husband's like, it's the High Priestess, dummy. He was absolutely right. But it took me a really long time to accept that I could have that, like you said, that responsibility. And I was keeping sacred space for people in the middle of a reading. And I was holding myself out of that space, so that they could go through the journey themselves, because you're stronger when you do it yourself, and it kept me from over emoting and over connecting and walking away from readings with my fucking heart broken every time, so
I think you really kind of hit on the most important and most frustrating part about the High Priestess. So if in the linear function, we've just met the magician, if we're on that little journey, and then the High Priestess, the most important and most difficult is you are going to have to find it in yourself. Like, it's not going to mean shit unless you have really come to that.
Yeah.
You read a book, get told this, that, but it's just like the High Priestess, the tarot reader. And again, there's like boundaries have to be present, but it's, what are those boundaries for? To hold concentrated sacred space for that person, for them to get what they need, and whether they get it or not in a certain way doesn't have to matter to the person holding the space,
Right.
because
And
they can't control what that person's going to take in.
yeah, I had a conversation with someone a couple weeks ago about this, and I posted something on Instagram about how a truth about your, I can't remember what it was, something very deep and profound, I'm quite sure. But she said, I wish that I'd listened to this 10 years ago, if which I'd known this. I said, honey, if I had told you this 10 years ago, you wouldn't have been ready to hear it. And she said, fuck you, you're right. So you have to, if someone had told me 15 years ago, you are the high priestess, okay, I don't know what that means really, but thanks, that's nice. But I wasn't ready to hear it until I was, 42? And even now it kind of makes me a little uncomfortable because it seems presumptuous. But I had to be ready to look inside and actually say, you know what? Yeah, that's my job. This is what I do. This is who I am. And I tell the same thing to my clients. If I can tell you this forever, but until you believe it, doesn't make a difference at all.
Yeah.
So I tell them oftentimes, I will have faith in you until you do. I will light a candle for you and for your intent so that it gets higher and stronger. And I will hold faith in you until you're able to do that. That I can do. I can have faith in people. But what I can't do is carry their emotional burden for them and find the way out of that cave that they've wandered into. I can't do that. And it kind of sucks, but that's not my job, you know?
That is about as high priestess as it gets, woman. I'm just sitting here listening. She's all boom. I'm out. Mic
Well,
drop.
I have been doing this for some time.
I know you have, but I
It's
think
like, this is hard won stuff. This is not shit that I wandered into when I was playing cards in college for pot money. This is not like, I think that this is something that you have to learn through hard knocks, you know? Yeah, I'm finally here, but the important part is after I see the truth and after the high priestess is here, then what? You know, then where do I go? Then I learn how to take better care of myself. I slide into the Empress for myself. And after I'm finished, being Agra or whoever, then I can like snuggle up on my couch with my kids and be a mom and take that hat off. And it's an easy transition now because I know that the clothes that I wear for the Empress are not for my clients. Those are at home. And the hat that I wear as the high priestess is not appropriate for my family because first of all, they would roll their eyes at me and laugh, but also it's just not something that I use in my day-to-day. So the difference between these two cards is kind of going and seeking and asking respectfully and being a mom or being a lover or being a friend and just talking shit and having a normal day, because if you look at their surroundings, one of them's sitting on cushions near the grass next to a waterfall, and the other one is on a throne between two stone pillars in front of a hanging. I mean, this is ceremony, you know? So the degree of ceremony between the two women is so vastly different. And the tools that they have are different. One of them has a scroll. The other one's got a pretty little wand and a crown of stars. And she has just as much credibility and intelligence and insight as a high priestess, but she's not using it that day.
yeah.
Just hanging out with her pretty wand, being comfy on her cushions.
Yes, I think it would be very difficult to embody the HP, 24/7. We
Right?
don't see a lot of people in the real world. Here's an interesting combo of those, and Rash and I talked about this, and I think Cyndera and I did too, at least in the first podcast we ever did years ago about the High Priestess. The Oracle the woman who was the Oracle in The Matrix. The first Matrix movie. Now she was both, because she is a cookie baking. She's a grandma. She's sitting in her kitchen smoking cigarettes and baking cookies.
Right.
And yet at the same time, she embodied that, like, oh, I know you are coming to me, and I know it all. And haha, if you think I'm just going to hand it to you in a big, I'm going to hand you a binder. She's just like, no, you have to go in and find out. And she's creating that space and kind of given a blessing, like. The priestess gives blessing. It has that faith that lights the candles, but the work is still done by the supplicant, the person who's coming and showing up. So
and don't worry about the vase you're about to break. You know?
Exactly.
And
Or the kid bending the spoon with their mind.
Yeah, I think that it's like my friend Terry Aikizo wrote this great book called Small Medias at Large, and she talked about her mother, like talking to the girls in the neighborhood in New York, like this Italian mother, smoking and cooking and like telling people, here's what's going to happen, like with playing cards, right? And she's balancing that role beautifully. Isn't that the world, you know? Isn't that like the goal is to kind of change hats as you want, you know? And I have glimpses of that after all of this time, where I'll sit with a friend and I'll be talking with them about their life, and suddenly I know that I'm reading them, and I'll stop and say, I'm getting some stuff, and do you want me to talk about this? Whereas before I would have just run my fucking mouth like an idiot. And if they say yes, I'll pull out my cards and create that little area between us and use my cards to tell what's already coming to me. And it's not seamless, and it's not easy, and it's not something that I could recognize 5 years ago. But I think that we get there with time and with practice. You know, we learn how to seamlessly move between, because it is tiring and it is hard. And I used to work for California Psychics, and when I did, I would do readings for 7 hours at a time, and I would be a complete mess afterwards. Completely, I had to stop doing it. Some people can, and that's a level of, I'm going to say, artistry. You know, where you just get so into the flow that the flow goes through you and around you, but not of you. You know, goals, right? Hashtag goals. I don't know. If I'll tell you one thing, if I ever know everything there is to know about the High Priestess, I'm dead on the ground. I'm done. Because I keep learning more stuff as I get older.
So my thought for, we'll never know everything about everything, and the High Priestess especially. What my thoughts are right now for what, frankly, you know, it's April of 2018. I'm one, and this is, I don't know that you'll have an answer. It's one of those, I come to the High Priestess, I don't know that you'll have an answer.
Let me get my hat on.
Maybe it's a conversation. Well, because this is a very specific, strong, archetypal stage that does require, you know, the dropping of your artifice, the getting to the real thing. What is the High Priestess place for what I see as just absolute insanity? You know, and I hope and I pray we're at the end of this cycle of chaos. But I don't know that. I don't have any inklings. I know it's definitely not over. What?
I think we have another year and a half of crazy pants. What I think is going on, like with my High Priestess crown firmly on my head, I think that there has been a lot, like since Dr. King, there's been a lot of, and now racism is all better and poverty is all better, and there's nothing, we don't have to worry about anything. And there's been a lot of people going, those people, you know, and looking at all the ills in the world as people caused instead of systemic problems. And now that we have video phones, right, I think that was the key to this transformation that we're getting into. You can't hide anymore, and that sneaky racism is not so sneaky anymore. And not just that, but treating people like things, right? Which is as Terry Pratchett said, the root of all sin is treating people like things. And now that the internet exists and phones exist and we can all see each other clearly, all of the ugliness that was hiding has been stripped bare, and we can see it. And I think the High Priestess definitely has a hand in that, because she is showing us ourselves, and she is holding up a mirror and saying, look at this ugliness. What are you going to do about it?
How do you respond? Yeah.
It's sitting here. You've ignored it. You've said, not in my backyard. You've said all lives matter, ignoring the bleeding men in front of you, the Black men that are dying at a higher rate than anybody else in our prison, at a higher rate than anybody else in this country. And now what are you going to do about it? Because you see it now. You can't ignore it. You can't walk away. What are you going to do about it? And I think that we are trying to answer that. I think that's the next step, is we're trying to figure out what we're going to do about it. And we all have different ideas. And I think that the good guys will win. because I think that the bad guys will go start seeing that they're actually good guys and they need to shift their thinking. I hope, right? Idealistic, but fuck it, that's me. But I think that we're all looking into a mirror right now, and not all of us like what we see, and it's causing a lot of rage and anger and frustration that the promises made, if you were middle class and white and male, the promises that you could keep the same job for your life and retire on those benefits and your family would be fine and everything would be fine. That's not true. And so who do you blame? Who did that to you? Who's the victim? Well, you've got news people telling you exactly who to blame, strangers or brown people or whatever. And so you grab onto that. Well, that's not going to hold for long because everyone can see everything now. So what are you going to do? And I think that's the question that we're being asked as a country right now. What are we going to do? And it's very scary to look at yourself and not know
there's a ton of identity. It's huge. I mean, the word that gets identity politics. I'm like, but it's bigger than that. It's something that you were not taught or even got an inkling of that this would ever happen. That your identity of who you are is actually a construct to begin with. Right. But that's conceptual. So I think maybe the HP is it's the illusions that we've all had have to go away, and that I think we're maybe, I don't know if it's Empress or a version of HP, but we're all connected. Mm-hmm. Because this is happening to other people, it does affect us, and we are all. And I think the word that a lot of conservative use is responsible. Be responsible. The word responsible means, are you able to respond? So if we can just move it away from the judgment, which I think gets tied up in identity, but just go, okay, so this is happening. How do we respond? What is it that you can do to respond? And I think that's how people find their true identity, is by simple response. To go, that sucks, that's terrible, that would piss me off too.
Right.
Rather than I'm this and I'm only this, and it's tied up with what I have or whatever. So action.
I think that it's very widespread because a lot of people in the cracks of society, like the marginalized folks, everybody's kind of up and a target right now. Everybody. And I think that that's on purpose. I think that that's kind of the universe's way of saying, but your cousin is gay, and your friend is trans, and the guy that you like at work is black. So are you really thinking this? Is this really a thought that you can carry, having that connection in your family or in your life or in your heart? Because you can't distance yourself from Bob at the copy machine, and you can't make it go away, and you can't ignore it if his safety or his well-being is being threatened. And I think that's why every group that is other is being kind of lifted up right now, so that we can everybody say, well, wait a minute, that's not right.
And
I said immigrants should be deported. I didn't mean the guy who's been in my community as a doctor for 20 years. I didn't mean him. But now what are you going to do? Yeah.
I like that. I think that's a good place. I know I have to keep these conversations short. I know you and I could be like for another hour. We can
do this for hours.
I know. This has been it's been lovely.
I love you.
I love you.
Oh, we have to talk again soon. My next book's coming out in February.
Okay.
Oh, it's the new book about? It's called Tarot Elements: 5 Readings to Reset Your Life. And it's basically using the alchemical symbols for earth, air, fire, water, and spirit. I have designed 5 readings that are very, very simple and actually kind of mirror each other, to look at your home, mind, body, heart, and soul. What is it about that thing that is busted? How do I fix it? And how do I move on from right here, who I am right now? And it's kind of about forgiving the past and not freaking about the future until we get the present fixed.
Thanks for listening. We know you could have done something else with the last, 2 hours of your life, but we're so glad you spent it with us. And be sure to check out our guests, Rash at staywoketarot.com and Melissa at littlefoxtarot.com. And follow us on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Let us know what you thought of the show. If you have questions, comments, whatever, we would love to hear from you. And if you'd like to become one of our most favorite people in the world, become a patron. Just visit tiny.cc/tarot, and you too could be like these awesome humans: Richard, Sarah, Talia, Hillary, Peter, Rash, Christine, Kat, Allie, Geneva, and Yvonne. Thank you guys. You make us smile every day. The show is produced by Both And Media, and our theme music is by The Lunar Group. Until next time, aloha.